So, from the title, you know what we're talking about. Let me give a wellness check first. We are fine here where we are in California. As far as the coronavirus is concerned in our state, we are not okay. We have, I think, at this point, maybe the third or fourth highest amount of cases in the US. It may be higher than that. I haven't checked today for the update. The reason for this video today is one, it's Shabbat, so I'm home and I've been home, but I've been doing a lot of work and a lot of research actually on this topic, along with some other things that have pretty much been keeping my mind preoccupied. So if you've been watching the news, yes, we are on a stay in shelter or a shelter in place ordinance throughout the state of California. That looks different from county to county in some places, but for the most part, it has been recommended that we stay home except for things that are non-essential. And you didn't probably realize that there were that many things that you do that are non-essential. As for us, it has been not so much of an adjustment, but we're making it through it. So for now, where we are in California, things are fine. And so I'll cover a little bit more about what that looks like, what that'll look like for other people in coming weeks and months as we navigate through COVID-19. But my reasoning for addressing this audience and whoever clicks onto this video was to give a consensus and a better idea of what's actually happening. If you've watched the news, if you talk to people, depending on people's opinions and their religious beliefs or their ability to research or to navigate through the plethora of information that we have available right now, you may or may not understand what's happening. And I think specifically for people of color, especially the so-called Black community, the information that is often filtered to us or how we receive the information is at best partial and at worst just flat out ignorant. And I wanted to give some information from first a medical standpoint, and I do not and am not a medical professional, and but from just basic defining what things are, understanding what we don't know and what we do know, because as you all know, there's a lot of information out there about things that are similar to or that people think this is. And if you listen to how people present the information and the words that they use in presenting the information, you will understand that there is not a lot known and that there is a bunch of different opinions, all the way from the White House to your local level. So I wanted to give a blanket overview of just what some things are, what a coronavirus is, what COVID-19 is, or Corona SARS or COVID SARS is, and what it actually does to the body, what's actually happening. And then we'll move on and we'll get into how those of us who are obedient to the laws that are set in place by the Most High, how we have been prepared and how we will also be affected. Because I know that is probably a people's concern. And sometimes when we are afraid or when we don't understand, we shut out information or we fantasize the reality of how things will also affect us in this process. And I think right now the most important thing to do is to be fully informed, because when you're fully informed, you can make very, very good, very, very level-headed decisions as things change and as they have been changing and as they will rapidly change in the future. All right, so let's start with what is COVID-19? What is coronavirus? What is a coronavirus and what it's not? So let's just deal first with just a basic definition. So coronavirus, just the term coronavirus, is any family or any of a family of single-stranded RNA viruses that have a lipid envelope studded with club-shaped projections, which infect birds and many mammals, including humans, and include the causative agents, and include the causative agents of MERS, SARS, and COVID-19. So we're going to just work through that definition because I know that was probably a system overload. So I'm going to break this down. So coronavirus, big term. Under the term coronavirus is any single-stranded RNA virus. What's an RNA? An RNA is ribonucleic acid. A nucleic acid presents in all living cells. Its principal role is to act as a messenger carrying instructions from DNA for controlling the synthesis of proteins. Keep that term protein in your head. We're going to touch on that when we deal with what COVID-19 is. Although in some viruses, RNA rather than DNA carries the genetic information. Okay, so RNA is pretty much a microscopic in your body transportation system of information that pretty much like it says lipid envelope. It carries this thing to your body and it causes things like MERS, which is the Mediterranean version of SARS, or respiratory infection. SARS, which is what we saw not too many years ago, which is also a respiratory infection, and COVID-19, which is a respiratory infection. What COVID-19 is not. COVID-19 is not another flu. Coronaviruses can be flus. COVID-19, when it moved from being called just coronavirus to COVID-19, became in a category of respiratory viruses. Originally, when the information came out, it was called coronavirus because they didn't know what it was, but it fit into the category of coronaviruses based upon how it looked with those crowns or studded like clubs all the way around. It was, oh, this is a coronavirus. It's actually now called SARS-CoV-2, or which causes COVID-19. That's what we have now. So it's a coronavirus respiratory infection that's more aggressive than SARS, called COVID-19. Okay, so it is not a flu. It may cause flu-like symptoms, including fever and difficulty breathing, okay? But it's not the flu. When this information first came out, people were like, oh, it's just another flu. People are making such a big deal about the flu. More people die from the flu every year. Okay, so we have never had in human history, in recent human history that has been documented, because I don't know, I haven't gone through the medical databases and found other forms of COVID-19, but we have not had this particular strain of SARS-CoV-2 known as COVID-19. So all the information that was given to you originally was in an effort to inform you with information that they really didn't have. It was to give you what they knew, and then you would process what they knew. As the days go by, as the weeks go by, of course, more information is being developed based upon the cases that come in, the autopsies that are done on people who have died, and the symptoms that are being presented in hospitals all around the world. Okay, so where does COVID-19 or coronaviruses or SARS-CoV-2 come from? This is still inconclusive, but the testing has been done and it has been found in a particular type of bat. These particular type of bats have been linked to Wuhan, China, and to the areas where they have markets that sell and process what they call exotic animals as food. We'll get to that in a second as well. So the transfer into humans can be from the animal to humans. Now, I know there's conspiracy theory out there, and I'm not in any ways any less of a conspiracy theorist, and sometimes it's not even a conspiracy than other people. But I will start with this, and then I'll move back through COVID-19. The privileges that we have based in technology and our ability to travel, and the laws that we have rejected that are part of observational evidence and Torah, which is the way that mankind is supposed to live, are more of a contributing factor to this particular virus than mad scientists. I will tell you that, and we will unpack that a little bit further later. But I am not in any ways in denial of the power of the powers that be, but with a keen eye and with careful consideration for what's happening right now, and we'll also get into that later, I am very, very much adept to believe that what we're experiencing right now is very much similar to other portions of time in history where we get to choose what we want to do, but we don't get to choose the consequences and how those consequences affect other people. Back to where it comes from. So H1N1, also known as the swine flu, we've had the bird flu, comes from contact with these animals either through deforestation, travel, eating infected animals, and then that information getting into our bodies. That's important to know because I don't think that we take into consideration how food that we eat and where it's sourced from can be contaminated, and obviously and the same affect our bodies, or people who travel and then take those things with them. In recent history, in past history, if a outbreak of something happened, let's say in a place like China, that would have often been contained to that area and very limited amounts of people who could visit that area. Now, with the ability for people to travel 24 hours from one place to another, and you're talking about as far as China to California, you can be sick, not showing symptoms, and land in San Francisco with a plane full of people, and then 500 people can get off that flight, all infected. I'm exaggerating how this could spread, but let's just say in 24 hours, 500 people who are stuck on an airplane with the same stewardess serving them, touching cups, passing them back and forth. Those people can all be infected and being released into a city. And say there were multiple sick people from an area like Italy who got on an airplane, and these airplanes come and go every hour if you've been to an airport, then that thing could rapidly spread. Okay, so when you're talking about the lack of screening and other things, human error can be definitely taken into account. Okay, so how smart is COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2? So COVID-19 is extremely smart. Yes, viruses have a, if you will, brain. They think, they replicate. There's information being passed. So before, with SARS, the host or the person who contracted the virus would die relatively quickly. The incubation period, meaning the time that the time from which the virus entered the body till the time where the patient showed symptoms and often died, was a very, very short period. With COVID-19, the incubation period can be up to 2 weeks. That means that a person can be sick, can have been exposed or infected, and 2 weeks can go by where that person shows no symptoms. Meaning that I can feel perfectly fine and see my family, hug my children, hug my niece and nephews, go to work, take a trip, come back, and have been actively shedding this virus, showing no symptoms. So with SARS, the virus had not figured out a way how to enter into the body and replicate so fast. Where with COVID-19, this virus has been able to enter into the body and replicate at a much faster rate. Going back to the thing on food and bats that have been eaten and people who have handled and come in contact with bats. The mad scientist is not always the person in the lab. The mad scientist is the person who disobeys the natural law of things, because your body acts as a petri dish, if you will. And when we handle things and we enter them and we allow them into our body, right? Like foods we're not supposed to eat, or animals we're not supposed to touch or handle, or, wild animals that we would have never come into contact before if we weren't eating them. Once it comes into the body, the virus is now not only bringing its information, but it's also gathering information for the body. So when viruses happen, and that's how you get different strains, they get smart and learn how to live. They have to find a host. They have to live, right? And so they're also going to mutate as they develop, as if you've seen it, mitosis, and you've seen something split and then split again and then replicate and then replicate and then replicate. Well, as it's replicating, it's getting smarter, and then it passes into another host and gets smarter. That's not a mad scientist in a singular way, like a person sitting with, the black goggles and the lab coat with the crazy hair, and they're just like cracking up laughing. But our disobedience causes mad science. And so what has happened with COVID-19 is that because things have been interjected into the body and then mutated and become smart and figured out how to unlock in keys in the body to affect the body more aggressively, we have become the mad scientists in our inability to obey the laws that are set up in this universe for food and other things. And now this disobedience is now rapidly affecting other people. Okay. So I guess we'll get to this point. It's a very basic point. Germs are obedient. Everything in creation is obedient, except for humans. So when we tamper with things that are obedient by being disobedient, then we cause them to do to us what they have been created to do. Something interesting about bats, and we'll get back to what COVID-19 is, the strain of the coronavirus that is found in bats. What makes it so dangerous in the body of humans is that human bodies are created to rise their temperature, create a fever as the body is fighting off viruses. Well, for the coronavirus that is found in bats, bats fly, which means that twice a day their body temperatures are raised to a high degree. So the coronavirus in bats has a mutation based upon the genetic or the DNA structure of that particular animal, that mammal, to not react to high temperatures. Where other viruses react to high temperatures and die, it doesn't work like that for the coronavirus, because the bats already operate at a much higher temperature. So when our body temperatures rise, when we contract this coronavirus, it does nothing to it and it's able to still replicate and fight. But then our bodies are getting weaker because that process of our body fighting off a virus makes us weak. And then it allows, if you will, the virus to overtake its weaker host. It's very, very important to know. Okay. So COVID-19, what can it do? Where does it live? We're going to go through that. This can live on contaminated surfaces, as the SARS virus can. So it spreads sometimes explosively from doorknobs, elevator buttons, and contaminated surfaces in hospitals and elsewhere. But we also learned that unlike SARS, patients become highly infectious before they become seriously ill. And I'll actually share the links for where I gathered this information so that you can read it on your own, because I will skip over some things. Okay. COVID-19 acts like a super SARS and is far more infectious than its cousin SARS, okay? It is not just older people with underlying conditions who become very ill and can die. The first information that came out is because the first few people who were dying before there were these large numbers who were becoming infected were elderly. I'll explain to you why it affects elderly more in a more aggressive manner. But your susceptibility or your ability to get it is no less than anybody else. How it may affect you may be less based upon some some laid out factors, okay? So, younger adults, previously healthy people, and some children develop a viral pneumonia, okay? And I'll explain to you what this pneumonia is. And although prior reports suggested that 80% of people got only mild disease, it now appears that about half of these people, despite needing hospital admission, have moderately severe pneumonia, like walking pneumonia, okay? And it gets worse, which can take weeks or longer to recover. And there's a fundamental difference in how the flu and corona or COVID-19 kills. Many deaths from the flu are caused by secondary bacterial pneumonia and heart attacks that develop after the flu has weakened someone's resistance. With COVID-19, most deaths are caused by acute respiratory distress syndrome, which is acronymed ARDS. And it causes already damaged lungs to fill with fluid and makes breathing difficult. Let me explain to you what ARDS is. This is from the American Lung Association. ARDS is acute respiratory distress syndrome. It's a rapidly progressive disease occurring in critically ill patients. The main complications in ARDS is that fluid leaks into the lungs, making breathing difficult or impossible. ARDS occurs when there is trauma to the lungs, either directly or indirectly. So what COVID-19 does is it attaches to the proteins through your nose, and then it to your upper respiratory, and then it transfers to your lower respiratory. Happen very rapidly, and it can happen at the same time. And what happens is it affects the lining in your respiratory tract, and it damages the proteins. That's how it enters in, that envelope, that lipid envelope. And it causes those dead cells to shed, and then it fills up the lungs. And so, like ARDS, when the lungs become damaged because of the virus, that dry cough, it's agitated and it's causing that shedding, it's killing the cells as it's hosting in this area. Then the ARDS, from the trauma, causes fluid to leak into the lungs, making it difficult to get oxygen into the blood. ARDS can be associated with an acute medical problem or procedure. So what is ARDS? It's a buildup of fluid in the tiny air sacs in your lungs called alveoli. This means less oxygen can get to your organs, which is very dangerous. ARDS occurs when there is significant trauma that either affects the lungs directly or indirectly. Okay? Your body responds to this trauma with an inflammatory reaction that releases numerous natural molecules into the bloodstream. Normally, this inflammatory reaction could be protective and help you fight infection or heal from injury. However, in some people, these inflammatory molecules lead to the smallest blood vessels in the lungs leaking fluid. Fluid leaves these small vessels and goes into the alveoli. The alveoli fills with this fluid, making it difficult for oxygen to get into the bloodstream. How this affects the body. The fluid that leaks into the lungs makes it very difficult to breathe and leads to low oxygen in the blood or hypoxemia. The fluid in the lungs makes the lungs stiff and difficult to inflate. This increases the work it takes to breathe and get air into your lungs. When the body can't carry out the work of breathing and has low oxygen, it causes respiratory failure. In order to improve the amount of oxygen and reduce the work of breathing, most ARDS patients will be placed on a ventilator to support them while the lungs heal. If the inflammation and fluid in the lung persists, some patients will go on to develop scarring in the lungs. This is known as fibrotic stage, the fibrotic stage of ARDS. It is during this stage that the lungs can pop and deflate, leading to a collapsed lung, also called pneumothorax. So this is very serious. ARDS is a very serious disease, and even with the best medical care, between 30 and 50% of patients who are diagnosed with ARDS dies. Those who survive the disease will often have long hospital stays. One of the biggest problems with this disease is that many patients develop additional complications while they're in intensive care. Pneumonia, collapsed lungs, severe muscle weakness, confusion, and kidney failure. Okay, why was that important? Because COVID-19 causes ARDS. There is no cure for ARDS. There is no cure for COVID-19. The only way to stop COVID-19 is to alleviate how many people contract COVID-19 so that when, not if, but when people do, they have the care necessary through ventilators and respirators to allow them to be hooked up to machines until their body recovers. Now, not to scare anyone, because a lot of people get less aggressive forms of this. But we don't know at this point who gets the less aggressive and who gets it more in young people. And we do know that it affects old people. So that's the reason for social distancing. And we'll get to the other stuff, but in a very much medical way, it makes a lot of sense. Now, in the process, is there a lot of military stuff happening, and are there a lot of rights being infringed on, all for the safety and for life? Absolutely. But what's actually happening is real. So we have to learn how to distance what is a real threat and what will also be a long-term potential change in how we are able to navigate. And by navigating through the first one, which is the real threat, whether caused or uncaused by humans or bats, it's a real threat, and deal with the other part later. If you don't ever live to see martial law or the government take over your whole life, then what does it really matter? But if you can live, then we'll deal with how to navigate through that as well. And we'll talk about that briefly. Okay, so with COVID-19, most deaths are caused by acute respiratory distress syndrome, or ARDS, which causes already damaged lungs to fill with fluid and make breathing difficult. Unlike pneumonia, there is no pharmaceutical treatment for ARDS. That is why a potential shortage of ventilators is so dangerous. They are the last-ditch supportive treatment for COVID-19 while the body heals itself. There's no vaccine. Unlike the flu, there is no vaccine for COVID-19. And I'm not going to get into argument of vaccines. I'm just telling you, reporting the news. The flu vaccine is relatively weak compared with other vaccines. Around 60% protection in a good year when the vaccine is well matched to circulating strains, and 30% in a bad year. But there is a way to make the flu less aggressive. Okay, so as it mutates, there's something that's similar to it. With COVID-19, there's nothing that's similar to it. There's no vaccine, so it's as aggressive as it's going to be until further notice. Okay, there's no treatment for COVID-19. There are not yet any medications that can be used to treat COVID-19, although clinical trials are currently underway and are being accelerated. For flu, there's Tamiflu and other antiviral drugs shortening the duration of illness. For COVID-19, there is not that. So the best thing for people to do right now is preventative care, is to not get it. Because there's no treatment for it, the best thing to do is not get it. And the best way to not get it right now is to socially distance yourself and to build up your immune system. So that means your elderberry and your vitamin C and a balanced diet, cutting out things that cause high levels of mucus. I'm not telling everybody get on an alkaline diet. You do what is best for you. What I'm saying is you need to be healthy. The best way to fight it is to be healthy. So if right now you're on 10, 12 different medications because you're overweight or for underlying reasons, which is often food related for a lot of us, even though we don't want to believe it. If you are still eating pork and shellfish and exotic foods that can cause your body to not be as receptive to vitamins and other holistic treatments, now would be your time to let those things go. Okay, just put that out there. There is no immunity to COVID-19, so I don't care about your bloodline, your tribe, or whatever. If you are handling yourself ignorantly, there is a very high chance you will contract COVID-19. I don't know. I haven't done a survey of Hebrews that have contracted it. I haven't done a survey of blacks that have contracted it. I haven't done a survey of Hotep and Egyptologists and people who have contracted it, but I am positive that it is no respecter of persons. If you are not doing what you're supposed to be doing, if you're eating what you're not supposed to be eating, and you are handling yourself very, very irresponsibly in connection with the laws that have been set up by the creator, then there's a very high chance that you're going to contract COVID-19. And even then, if you are not distancing yourself from people who are doing these things, there's a high chance you will contract COVID-19 as well. Okay. Yeah, there's no immunity, so we're kind of done there. That is me reporting the news on just COVID-19. Now let's move into some of the more interesting things. All right, when it comes to the spiritual side of all of this, and I am not making it less spiritual. Like I said, I'm just putting out the things that are facts in the matter at this point. When it comes to end times, I know when we look at things like this and we are constantly in watch of what will unravel as things like this happen. And I think everyone, and I think at some points in time, even myself, we're waiting for this large or small, large in power, small in person group to fool us with trickery and then kill us all, right? And we've been trained, I think, through media and our own brains and religious groups to look to the powers that be to cause the end of the world, as we know it, I guess, in that sense. So when we're looking at the book of, Revelation and different things, we're always looking outward, like, oh, the Rothschilds and Donald Trump and all these people and mad scientists. And I don't think we ever stop and look at ourselves as humanity. And throughout history and the destruction of humanity in a biblical context, humans, regular everyday humans, had a lot to do with the destruction that was brought upon the world. Noah, right? And Yah looked out and man was wicked. And so Yah did it. And then we go to Tower of Babel and man was wicked and Yah did it. And we go to Sodom and Gomorrah and man was wicked and Yah did it. And I'm not saying this in a sense that Yah is a bad guy, because I don't think he is. I think that we all have the ability to make choices and choose. But we've been giving credit for everything that is happening and has happened, and the person and negating the one who has the permissatory, I made that up, hope it's a word, who allows, we're negating the one who allows it to happen. Nothing can happen without Yah. And so that takes away that whole great God in the sky who winds up a clock and casts it out and just lets everything happen. Because there have been times when things have seemed to be very, very aggressive when it comes to viruses and flus and Spanish flu and other things, and they have been, and then they haven't been, and then they have been, they haven't been. And man has a lot to do with how much man is protected during things, and it has a lot to do with obedience. So I think all this time we've been waiting for this powerful entity to come along and bring the world to an end. But when you look at the book of Revelation, I thought about this today. Have you ever stopped to think about who was causing the vials and the horses and the bulls and the plagues and the pestilence? It wasn't man. It was Yah. And during and throughout history, things like this, I believe, happen, like I said before, because of the choices we're allowed to make, but with the consequences we do not get to choose. And it goes all the way back to literally the beginning. The choice was to disobey. We didn't know the consequence was going to be death, or we, and Adam, and we all suffer from it now. Adam didn't know that the consequence of choosing to disobey blatantly would lead to the death of humanity, because now the wages of sin, the wages of disobedience, is death. All men will taste death eventually. Okay, so we can look at all the conspiracy theories attached to it, and that's what I'm not going to do. If you want that, I'm sure there's 50 million people out there offering you 50 million exciting things to be able to latch on to. We're not going to do that. It's not going to be our thing. What we're going to do, though, is start here with wisdom. we need to know what wisdom is necessary to deal with our present situation. So the first thing, I'm just going to say this just in case you're getting tired and you won't want to go through the rest of this, or if you want to spot through it. Stay out of the way. Stay out of the way. We have gotten our lessons as a people, and now I'm talking to us as a whole, as a community, from the past. And the past has shown us that we have to learn how to allow things to carry it out as they should. Okay, so when it comes to things like this, we have been prepared. And for those of us, and I'm including myself in this group, who have been keeping the commandments and who have been keeping the feast days, we began to do them as a form of identifying. But those of us who saw the greater meaning in these things, and not that the identity is any less meaning, but I'm saying the greater meaning, which is when we are obedient, we learn how to navigate through different situations. Our obedience in the process teaches us what to do and what not to do. For instance, I think it's quite interesting that Passover is literally right around the corner. Sorry, I'm a mom and I have a kid who's literally standing right outside this door. So I'm going to ask the other person that's in here to grab her because I don't know exactly what it is, but there's a window. And so it's like I keep seeing her out of my peripheral standing in the glass window. So just give me a second to deal with that. Okay, so as you all know, Passover is right around the corner. And Passover is a feast that, while it's very much a feast of liberation, there are themes in it that are teaching us lessons. One of the themes in Passover is plagues. Go figure, right? The same plagues that we'll obviously experience in the last days. In some degree, we've been shown them in the liberation of a people out of the bondage of a nation, which is Egypt at that time. And during the plagues that come to Egypt in the book of Exodus, we see there being a social distancing from the people who the plagues are happening to and the people who are trusting in the one who is allowing the plagues. So when the Most High is executing the plagues, he says very, very clearly, I'm doing this to cause there to be a distinction between you and them. Now, the distinction was, by you being obedient, this will not happen to you. If the Israelites had not been obedient and followed the Most High, then the same things that were happening to the Egyptians would have happened to them. So, everyone gets a warning. The Egyptians and the Israelites. This is what's going to happen. It was in a public way. Do this. Those who didn't listen, if you didn't bring your animals in and the hail came, guess what? Your animals are going to die just like the other ones out in the field. Hail wasn't like falling away from other people's stuff. In Goshen, they were safe because they were obedient. In areas that were not obedient, they weren't. Now, when it came to like locusts, the crops of the Hebrews were safe. When it came to other pestilence, they were safe. Things didn't happen in Goshen that were happening. But if you had your resources and your things mixed in with the Egyptians, it was going to be destroyed. So there was a social distancing practice in Passover in the story that led to the Exodus. Okay, next, when it came to Passover, the actual last portion of the liberation of the Hebrew people from the Egyptians, we see something very interesting. We see shelter in place, right? The sheltering in place was simply this: go into your homes, prepare some food, do this like this, put this blood over your doors so when the death angel comes, he doesn't come into your house. The first Passover that was kept in individual homes. They didn't all gather into one space. Yah told them to gather enough for them and their family and do in their homes, put blood over the door, and the death angel would pass over. I think it's very interesting in this time that, not that COVID-19 is the Passover death angel, because that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that in our keeping these feasts, we have been prepared. We know what this looks like. We know how to gather and prepare, and we know what that looks like, and we know how to keep our distance when Yah is allowing something. And I'm not saying he's allowing it to the end of the world. I don't know. No man knows the time or the hour when that's going to happen. But what I am saying is, this is not strange for us. This is not, we've done it. If you've done Passover, this is what it was supposed to be doing. Last year, when I asked, what are we doing as a nation? And as we're gathering and we're having these huge parties, are we missing the lessons that are a part of these feasts and exchanging them for celebration when we're still in captivity? I remember asking that question, and now it seems very, very important that we know this, that we know that what we've been doing is preparing us. It's like, I don't know if any of you watch Karate Kid, or if you watch Kung Fu movies at all, but everything is Kung Fu, right? He's like, jacket on, jacket off, lift your arms. Every movement, everything you do is preparing you for battle. When it comes to Torah and when it comes to the feast days, everything you do in all of those feasts, when it comes to harvesting and gardening and having and preparing and how you gather and when you gather and in what way, and in camping and in Sukkot and in atoning and in repentance, all of those things are the wax on, wax offs of our faith and of our lives. So when you're going through the motions of doing, and when stuff like this happens, it's not really a big deal, because you should have been waxing on and waxing off the whole time, so that when it says shelter in place and everybody's panicking because they can't fly somewhere to keep Passover, and you forgot that the first Passover was kept in individual homes. You're not keeping Passover. You are keeping Passover in the most real way. You really are sheltering in place until the death angel passes over this time. You're not exposing yourself to what is happening to the outside world. You're being wise and you're moving circumspect given the situation. You know how to do that, and you've been keeping Passover with your group, so you know what that looks like, and you know what that looks like for your family. You're given the ability to witness to those in your home. You're being given the ability to allow your husband to be the priest over his home and not just your moray somewhere. Like, you are being allowed to actually live out Torah in an authentic way, and you've had the practice. So that's just one thing I want to put out there. I mentioned it earlier, but we're not invincible. I've heard things going around like, oh, Black people are not this and this is not happening. And maybe people in Africa are not. I mean, the numbers are significantly lower than a lot of places. But what I will say is this, us is in America, we don't have a pure bloodline, if that's what people are referring to. And us is in America, most of our people, the browns and the so-called blacks, are stacked on top of each other in buildings with people and in cities with people. And we're not so spread out like people who live in a continent like Africa that can fit 3 Americas and some others in there. So we have to look at the circumstances which we are under, and this is an opportunity for us to be even more obedient, not necessarily in the sense to the powers that be, but to our Father, to our Creator, as He has laid certain things out. We are in a position and in a place to have to be very, very circumspect, especially those of us who do live in apartments and in areas where we are in close contact with people and are not afforded the opportunity to live in a space where we're separated. Okay. Another thought that crossed my mind, I'm looking through my notes during this, is I don't know if any of you ever wondered how people didn't repent when all this stuff was happening during in the book of Revelation, as the vials are being poured out, earthquakes are happening, all these signs are happening. And this is a very good indication of that. the last thing, and I haven't heard it much of anywhere. I haven't even really heard it from evangelicals, and talking about like, your Christian evangelicals. Might hear it from some of the more radical groups, but you're not even hearing churches and pastors really preaching that, what, right now is a good time to repent. Right now is a good time to reset. Right now is a good time to, stop sinning and doing all the things that you're doing, and to renew your mind, and to think about, what's happening around you. And maybe it's not the end of the world, but what if you do contract COVID-19 and die? Are you prepared for that? And I think that's a very interesting thing, because in the book of Revelation, people only got more and more, their hearts got harder and harder. And it didn't lead to a bunch of repentance. And so I think within our groups, especially within those people who are in the Hebraic walk, I think it's a really good time to kind of look and introspect about the things that we argue about and the things that we separate over, and the judgments we pass, and how those don't really make any sense. And the solidarity that we lack over the past, and it's been happening a lot, but I think it's very interesting that over the past year or two, there's been so much division within a community of people who claim that Yah has chosen them, and claim that they have the way, and claim that they're living in Torah. And many people have been I wouldn't say the victim, but have been affected by the lack of solidarity within our community, myself being one of them. I plenty of other people. And we're in a time like this, we should be able to come together and exchange our resources and open our homes to people who don't have enough. And in a time like this, where we should be on one page about what this looks like, and what we should be doing as a community, and not thinking about necessarily ourselves or our small group of people who have shown themselves to be faithful, where we could extend our hand to our neighbor. It's just sad. It really is. Like, it really is, where we created, well, I wouldn't say we did. I would say Yah allowed a global community in a lot of ways to be created through a lot of the work that people have done in different Hebraic leaders. And I'm still I don't watch any of what's going on, less than I even did before, so none. But I still hear here and there that people are arguing with these people, or putting these people down, or doing this and doing that. And I'm looking around, I'm like, dang, but we have mothers and children and families who follow a lot of the ministries, who are in apartments, who do live in places like California and New York, and now are on shutdown and do have limited resources, and didn't have money to go out and stockpile. And because we can't seem to figure out when a day starts, or do you wear long fringes or shaggy fringes, or head wraps or no head wraps, and skirts or no skirts? Now we can't help anyone. And now we don't have the ability to meet in buildings, a lot of us, because it is against the ordinances of the government to gather. Now, how do we help each other? Because now, who do you trust? Who do you let come to your house? Who do you let come pick up resources? Who do you drop off things to? Can't even trust anybody anymore. And when all that stuff happened online not a few years ago, months ago, but as it's been happening over the past few years, nobody stopped to think of what this could affect in the long term. Who is this going to affect? And now I don't know who to trust. So now let me socially distance myself from these people due to bullshit. And now I don't have anybody. And now I'm listening to somebody online who doesn't even know who the hell I am, and can't offer any support. It's tragic what we have allowed. But I think what can happen now in a time like this is a regrouping, because all the people that started the mess, it's a good word to use, all the people that started the mess, where are they? Where are they? Who are they helping? Who are they? Do they have a word from Yah on how you guys are going to survive? Do they have a COVID-19, immunity pill? Are they going to sing you into... No, absolutely not. And so I think something like this is awesome in a terrible way for a reality check within our community. what matters and what doesn't. Because right now, a whole lot of stuff doesn't matter when you don't have nothing to eat and you don't know how you're going to feed your kids. A whole lot doesn't matter when you can't trust the person who's telling you, oh yeah, Yah's going to save you in the last days if you just stay in the city. And people like me have been like, hey, maybe, you know, you can meet up with some people and get to know them and possibly like find people who have land, and but can't trust any of y'all because you watch 40 different people online and then you bring your bullshit to people's houses. And now you're like, we have to do better, because this is indicative of a time that is coming, if it's not this, where we do need to be close to each other, where we do need to have allies within our community. And now we're looking at each other all side-eyed because we don't know who to trust. So do we just keep on with business as usual? I don't know. But it's something to really, really take into consideration. Find your loyalty. Stick with it. It starts with Yah, and then you have to find solidarity within your community. Like literally, Passover, if you didn't have enough lamb, if you couldn't kill enough, then you had to share. If you didn't have a lamb, that means you didn't have blood. So nowadays, now we're hoarding the blood. Like, I'm putting the blood over my house. I don't know about you. You know what I mean? Like, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous as a community where we have the resources and the ability to, on our own as a people, navigate through all of this. Our ancestors did it through the Great Depression and through slavery and through the transatlantic slave trade and through the diaspora. And all of a sudden there's COVID-19 and now we're still camp banging. Like, this is really, really, really gone too far. Like, absolutely too far. The ones who suffer worse are the ones with no safety net. And while I'm saying this, let me say this also. Just because your family is not woke doesn't mean that they're not your family. Doesn't mean that you should, as a Hebrew, as you profess to be, have been taking steps and making preparation so that if you do, or if you need to speak to them, if this is something that could be life or death, and if they do need resources, you should have been storing. You should have had. You should have been preparing. So that when they come to you, like the whole world came to Joseph in Egypt, and when they come to you, like we had to gather together and share our resources during the Passover, you have something to offer, and you haven't pushed them so far away that now things are happening and they are confused and they don't know, and now they're just trusting the government. We will be held accountable for that. We as a people. As a nation of people who say we are chosen and we should know, we will be held accountable for how we navigated and handled our family and the people around us. Because now, and for Hebrews and the awakened Hebrews and our families who may not be awakened, in times like this, guess who they're going to go back to? Daddy. To the government. Because guess what? Our community has nothing for them. So when they don't have relief for their jobs, and for people who have given up their secular job and stayed home and homeschooled, and now they try to go to making natural products that other Hebrews were supporting because they were told you shouldn't do this or shouldn't do that. Who's going to help them now? Can't get an egg, can't get a bar of soap, nothing, just absolutely nothing. We don't have it. It's not there. And it shows the weakness of our infrastructure as a people. And it's very, very sad and very, very depressing. So, while you're out there and you're washing your hands and sheltering in place and quarantining and navigating through this time that will absolutely change the world as we know it. There's no way it won't. It's already has. Like, even if today they said, okay, everybody's good, you can all go back outside, we're not going to navigate through the world in any way that we have before. And for those of you who are not affected, like we are here in California, New York, and Washington, and Italy, and Spain, and Europe, and, China, it's coming to you too. This is not going to be over overnight. This is going to be like this for a while. We had a long time to sit and think about a lot of things. And while you're out here, like I was saying, washing your hands, quarantining your body, and while you're storing up, do the same thing for your soul. Do the same thing for your mind. this is a process. Get the leaven out, right? Passover, all in this process. Purge. Stand in solidarity with the community that you have become a part of, and also with those around you who in this time are looking for direction. And in times like this, those of us who know who we are and whose we are should be the direction. We shouldn't be the ones kicking people while they're down. But in a space like this, where I know a lot of those of you who are listening are privy to the information as it pertains to Torah, you got to humble yourself so that you can be humble enough to help somebody else. And I know that sounds backwards, because when you think about the person that needs you, you think that they should be humble. No, you need to humble and think of the end game for a lot of people. And you have to think about the people who don't know. There's so many people who don't know Yah. There's so many people around the world who don't know Yah. And there is, I would say there are still opportunities, but there is still opportunity for that truth to get out and for obedience to become real in the lives of people. And so they do see a change. And so they are set apart, and there is a distinction made between those who are keeping and following Torah and those who are not. But in the meantime, stay safe, be smart, introspect, filter through all the stuff you're hearing from not only people like myself who are sitting here behind a camera, but also the people who are on television, the media, and really, really get a hand on what's happening and have a game plan for when this is over and how we will move differently. And if this is going to be long-term, how right now we can move differently and circumspect to the Most High, because it's very, very important. We're going to go through questions, and I'll answer as many questions as my mental capacity will allow me to. If I don't have answers, I'll refer you to the information, and then that's kind of how we're going to wrap this up. All right, so there's a question on where did I get my shirt. I'll have them share the link. I love you people. Yeah, they'll share the link in the chat, but the shirt, if the person who made the shirt can text me where they get the shirt, I'd appreciate it. I'm watching on my iPad. How many Black people have died from this? I wonder. Anyone know? Not, well, I mean, in the scheme of things, it's very new, and not a lot of people have died. I mean, I'm saying a lot of people have died, but I'm saying the amount of people that have died as this has picked up is not even indicative of the number. I don't think we have numbers on race. A lot of this is happening in a lot of predominantly European areas, and it depends on what you consider Black people, because Iran's been hit really hard, and Iran is a people of color. The Iranian people are. We have not had a lot of tests here in the U.S., and it's actually not on its highest. The curve is not, we're at our peak here in the U.S., so we don't know. And I don't know if they're giving demographics based upon race, but I can almost deduce based upon the areas where it's happened that a lot more people have been people who are privileged. And that can be any race of people, but the more privileged are European people, people who travel, people who come in contact with people who travel, people live in areas where people travel more frequently. And so a lot of people who live in the hood don't really have that ability. So I will guess, because also we are a very cautious people, and I will commend us on this. We are a very clean people. So where other people have issues with washing their hands and their clothes and cleaning their houses, as a people, contrary to theories and things that have been put out about Black people or people of color, we are very, very clean people. So I would suspect that unless there is contraction through community contact, that a lot of Black people who don't travel as much as Europeans and don't live in a lot of areas where there are high populations of Europeans in certain cities, it's probably relatively low at this point. What about the African professor who states he has a cure and offered it to China and US and etc.? Call him, because we need it. But right now, there's always a flood of information, And if they have a cure, that's wonderful. But I think it has a lot more to do with contact. If he offered a cure, I hate to talk about dollars and cents here, but economics, control, and a bunch of other things are important to the powers that be. So if this African professor had a cure and he put it out there, and let's say he does have a cure, then yes, the U.S. and the powers that be will buy it, and I don't know what they'll do with it after that. But if he does and he put it out there, then okay. But I don't think if he had that kind of laboratory experience, he'd be putting it online. He'd probably been talking directly to those people. And that's just because that's kind of how the world works. But I don't know. Hopefully he does. Are we putting real blood on a doorway? No, we're not putting real blood on our doors. Sacrifice is over. We have a sacrifice in the Messiah as far as the propitiation, which is the remission of the second death, meaning you got stalled, but no. So no, you're not putting real blood on your door. Everything at this point is symbolic. It is a test. What we're doing is a testing ground for all the things that'll happen in the universe. Everything that Yah has and does in his law and his feast days are attached to things that can happen in the world and how to navigate through them. Like I said, wax on, wax off. So no, we don't need real blood. If you put blood on your door, you'll probably attract a bunch of flies at this point, and maybe somebody might knock on your door and talk to you and they might have coronavirus. So don't put blood on your door. How am I holding up? I'm doing good. Actually, I'm been excited about being home because I've been at work and not at home. So it's given us time to kind of do some things that have been behind, getting used to being back home all the time with my children and my family. And for working moms, you know that it can be a hassle because they ask you for things like 15,000 times a day. But we're doing good. We're doing good. I'm naturally a little bit of an introvert, so I've liked being able to be still. And I have decided that if as much as I can control, I don't want to be the person that brings the California Rona into the house. So I do like to be mobile, but I've been still. How do I explain to my husband about the language? I don't understand the context of that question, so can the person re-ask the question?
She's asking about when you said BS.
Oh, asking about when I said BS? Like bullshit?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I don't know what you tell your husband. I don't know. I don't know who your husband is. Yeah. What was can I get the context?
She said, he's under the impression that we shouldn't be saying profane things. So since she, I lost where I was at. So since she's knowledge in culture, I wanted to get her take on how it applies or doesn't apply pertaining to our people and culture and what is deemed.
Well, I don't think bullshit is a bad word. So in the context of it, I mean, if we want to talk about just etymology, language, I mean, bulls, shit. And this is bullshit. And there's piss that word's in the Bible, and donkeys are called asses. I don't know. So it depends on how a person wants to take it. If they want to negate all the previous information for bullshit, then that's their opinion. Unsubscribe. All right, next. So who is salvation for? Salvation is for anyone who wants salvation. Point blank, period. Salvation is open and available. Anybody during the flood could have got on the boat. The door is open. Did the door close at a particular point? Yes. So should we be the person standing in between a person and salvation? Absolutely not. Will lemon, honey, and ginger help fight the virus? I think keeping your body healthy will help your body be able to fight the virus. Being able to fight the virus with lemon, ginger, and honey, I don't know. I don't know what the components of the virus is, what keeps it away and what doesn't, but I know health, being healthy is. So if you're drinking lemon, ginger, and honey, if you have a good diet, then as your body, if you contract it, gets weak, maybe your body is stronger, so it's not as weak as the bodies of people who have had more severe cases. When you get the leaven out of your home, do you throw it away or just get it out? Throw it away. Throw it away. That's just the easiest answer for that. Now, if it's a life and death situation, we'll revisit that. Because I don't know. If that's the last thing you have to eat and you have nothing else in your home, hopefully you can contact somebody. Hopefully you can contact myself and we can figure that out. But I don't want to speak within the context of why you're asking that. If it's just for Passover, throw it away. Get rid of it. You don't need it in your home. For most of us who are preparing for Passover, we normally tend to buy less leavened things as we get closer to Passover, because we know we have to throw them out and we don't want to waste. So I don't know if you've been already preparing, but it's a good time to prepare. The military effort and other rights that will be infringed on. I don't know. I don't work for the government, but I will tell you that all of your rights have already been infringed on. Don't worry. So as far as martial law and what that looks like, your ability to move around, move about, it's already happened for us. Like, we couldn't even have Shabbat gathering today because can't meet with 10 or more people. Actually, it's probably pretty much can't meet at all. And that includes out in parks and other places. So, yeah, it's already happened. So get used to the new normal. It's said that people will be thrown into concentration camps, etc. Is this virus a distraction from something more? Is it a distraction, or is it what's going to cause people to be thrown into concentration camps? What's the difference between them setting up a tent in a baseball field and keeping all the people who are in incubation period in a concentration camp? Nothing to me. So if you don't want to end up in a concentration camp, learn how to stay in shelter. And maybe it might get worse when it comes to vaccines if they make the vaccination mandatory. But then at that point, like, Paul was in prison. I know I'm being really frank about it, but I think we sometimes want to sensationalize and want to hope that these things are not going to happen. But if they do, like, are we not prepared? Do we think we're going to live forever? Like, we're not. Like, so the best thing to do would be to do the best thing that we know to do right now. And that's the reality. Like, we're worried about concentration camps, but are you gonna, like, what are you gonna do to get yourself put in one? I think, like, we haven't reached a point where people are just being rounded up because they're black or because they're green or because they're brown. Like, if you get sick, you will be quarantined. And it may not be a concentration camp based upon those Left Behind movies, but if you get sick, and like here in California, they've already contracted with hotels to put people in hotels in individual rooms and give them care while they're being quarantined if it gets that bad. Then, like, that's a concentration camp. In my mind, if I have to be separated from my family in a building with medical personnel and possibly guarded so I can't come out, that's a concentration camp. It looks a lot more fancy, but is that not the same thing? Is not being kept in a hospital until you recover on a ventilator kind of like being in a concentration camp? Like, we need to start looking at these things outside of this, like, Left Behind mind or outside of Auschwitz mind. Like, we haven't reached a Holocaust kind of situation mindset, but can it get that bad if the medical system collapses and you can't contain the people and there are just a few healthy people and they move all the unhealthy people away? I guess so. But what are you defining as a concentration camp? You mean like guillotine? Like they're going to just start offing people who have coronavirus? I don't think we've reached that point yet. But I do think that there will be laws in place, and if you don't obey the laws of the land, you can potentially put yourself in harm. And so the same way that the Messiah knew how to navigate through the different intersectionalities of their occupation by the Roman government, we need to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove, and pick our battles and how we want to fight them when it comes to navigating around this. Now, we all know when it comes to disobeying Yah and Torah, which can put you, your soul, and everything else in hell, no, we do not obey. Like, that's easy. But when it comes to the things that we don't have any control over, yeah, we do. And I don't know if we forgot as a people of color, but we've been through a lot worse stuff. Like, not too long ago, our people were in slavery, which meant that they'd be killed for even leaving somebody's property. You are in your own home. You are governing your own self for the most part at this point. And so you're in a lot better position. So no, we're not escaping anything, but we can navigate through this very wisely. What are the chances of reinfection if you get the virus? Right now, there is no, I don't know if I got through that whole point, but there is no immunity to it that they found. And so because it's not like the flu, where, once you can get the flu. I mean, plenty of us have gotten the flu more than once. So it's not like there's no vaccine or nothing out there for it. So there could be potential. They've had people that they say have come back and retested positive after showing negative tests or after being released. I don't know if this is because people have, because they hadn't been well long enough to know if the virus had passed through their body or not. But that's something that we'll just have to see in time, I guess. Yeah, I don't know, but I'm gonna say at this point, because it's like pneumonia, I'm gonna treat it like pneumonia in the sense of how it operates, and there's no cure for it. There's no cure for something. You either stay sick forever, or after you get it, you possibly could get it again. But I think your body will have built up antibodies to it after you've had it once, and you probably shouldn't get it again. And some people won't. I just want to put that out there too. Like, some people won't. Some people won't even know if they have it, if they even do have it. So that's very, very important to note that, you may not even know you had it, or if you get it, it may just be nothing. And that could be just a blessing from the Most High in itself. Like, or you could be around somebody and take care of a person and not catch it. A few years back when H1N1 went around, my husband got H1N1. And I took care of him the whole time, and I never got sick. And I'm not saying it was because of some miracle. I don't know. I know I washed my hands, and he was pretty much isolated, and he slept most of the time, and I fed him, but I didn't get H1N1. I didn't get swine flu. So there is a possibility, but because swine flu actually is attached to another strain of flu, it could make it so that your body can resist, or if it did get in my system, my body probably just kicked it out. Where with this, we don't have that information yet. Any other questions?
I don't see any more.
No? Okay. All right, so that's it on that. I hope you guys are informed. I hope you forgive me and the question on defecating bulls if that offended you. And in the meantime, stay healthy, stay safe, stay strong, stay woke. Shalom.